Okay, welcome back to our next lesson. In this lesson, we're going to discuss the verification of risk control measures. ISO 14971 requires the implementation of risk control measures followed by verification that they were implemented. And then, of course, it's not good enough to just verify that you've implemented the risk control measure. You must, in fact, verify that the risk control measures are effective. Okay, and it is the risk management plan will specify how the two distinct verification activities will be carried out. So consider how earlier discussed risk control measures would be verified in terms of implementation and effectiveness. And we have two notes here. Note number one hazardous situation may require multiple risk control measures to be deemed acceptable. Generally, we'll try introduce as many risk control measures as we can. And note number two is that one risk control measure may require multiple activities or tests to demonstrate that it is in fact effective. Okay, so it's not a one-to-one relationship. One hazard can turn into many risks, can turn into many risk controls, can turn into many tests, etc. And you can have one risk control can be used to mitigate many hazards as well. So what we'll do down here, so normally when you do risk management, the first part of it is of course the risk assessment. The second part is the risk control analysis and verifying that they are implemented and effective. And effectively the second part we draw out now in this table. Okay, so in the table we'll go risk ID, hazardous situation, the same ones that we had before. Then we'll say what is a suitable risk control to introduce. We'll ask how do we verify its implementation and how do we verify its effectiveness. Okay, so if I use the same risk from earlier examples, we had risk 1. Here I'll just copy over its same hazardous situation, which was electric shock to the operator. The risk control measure that I would introduce here would be that the product shall comply with IEC 60601, which covers how to introduce basically MOP barriers, the means of protection barriers that prevent electric shock. And what we would need here is we would want a 2 MOP barrier for our enclosure and a similar for the cables. So that's one. You would give that a unique ID as well, maybe RC number 1. Okay, you'd also want probably for the voice prompts, so voice prompts to warn the user to not touch the patient during pulse delivery, etc. So that's risk control 1 and risk control number 2. Now, to verify their implementation, we would just add that one to the product requirements to verify the implementation of that. That could be a system level test, that one, or it could just be added to the requirements as well. So for this one, that one, I'll just say add a product requirement, or you might add it to the product requirement and then link where it is in the requirements. So you'd say C product requirement, let's say P or 1, and this one, same thing, you'll say C product requirement P or 2. Okay, so you just add some requirements there that aims to implement that risk control. When it comes to verify the effectiveness, this is the more important thing. What will demonstrate that we have done this will be our safety compliance test report. So normally to obtain the IEC 60601 safety compliance test report, companies will go to external test houses and they will do the 60601 testing and then they'll give you a report, and that will demonstrate that that particular risk control of preventing electric shock is effective because that's a consensus standard, so it'll just be taken for granted that it's effective. This one here is a bit different. Voice prompts warn the operator to not touch the patient during pulse delivery. That's going to be some form of usability testing, so I'm going to put down C simulated use test report. Or if you had some form of summative human factors testing, the testing would have to demonstrate that your voice prompts were in fact effective when the device was used in a simulated use condition with who you would expect to be the operators, which would just be lay people in this case. So effectively it's going to be testing. You know, we introduce risk control measures in our design, you introduced them as requirements. You could have put here to link to design details or different design outputs that demonstrate where they were implemented, but people's focus is always going to go on the testing of do you have hard evidence risk controls are effective by your testing. And of course, for different risk controls and risk control measures, it won't always be test reports for some standard or things like usability testing. It can also be stuff like your unit code testing in software, your integration code testing, and your product system level testing as well. Just those different test verification reports can also be the verification it was effective, or it can often be some other form of analysis. There's always edge cases where testing is not practicable itself, and so you come up with some other form of evidence to try and prove your risk control measure was effective. Okay, so I'll leave that lesson there. I'll see you in the next.